here, and of course, welcome to all of you watching from home. We have St. Paul News Neighborhood Network filming this forum tonight. The broadcast times are written on the sheet of paper that you have. The League of Women Voters follows well-established guidelines that the candidates were given, and you have in your program today the various rules for the forum. Please reference these if you have any questions or concerns. Tonight, the candidates have 2 minutes each for opening and closing statements, so that's 4 minutes altogether, and 1 minute to respond to each question. If I think a question's going to be a little more difficult, I will say at the time to the timer that it will be, we'll give them a longer period of time. I want to make sure the candidates can see the timer, so if the timer could just put the stop sign up there so that we know when it is time to stop talking. We'll let you finish your sentence, but please make sure it's just a real simple sentence rather than a complex sentence. Candidates are going to begin in alphabetical order and legislative district order. So for that, we will have Andrew Livingston and Tim Mahoney from District 67A as the candidates. And for 67B, we have Sheldon Johnson and John Quinn. So I just want to make sure that's everyone ready to go? All right. Well, let's give them a round of applause just so that they can kind of calm their nerves. So let's begin with 67A, and we'll hear from Andrew Livingston first.
Hello, my name is Andrew Livingston. I'm running for state representative for House District 67A. My three main points that I'd like to advance are income tax reform, property tax reform, and electoral reform. Income tax reform, our personal income tax system, I think is just broken. I think it's too complex, it's too cumbersome. The tax forms themselves, when you print them all out, they're about an inch thick. That's just broken. We need to simplify it with more of a simplified flat tax system. Property tax reform, I think we should exempt senior citizens from property tax, 67 and up. We have an exemption right now for disabled veterans. That's good, we need to keep it, but we need to extend that to senior citizens. Electoral reform. There's 12 states that do not have a primary for president, and Minnesota is one of them. We have a primary for governor and senator and little house races like this, but we don't have one for president, and I think we should have one so that everybody has a choice and a voice in who's on the ballot for president. And also I just think we need a change in direction downtown. I think we need to get away from the tax and spend and now the borrow and to spend philosophy of our current administration to more of a pay-as-you-go system. I think we need a smaller, more efficient government. I think that's best for the long-term health of the economy of our state. My name is Andrew Livingston, and I hope I have your support on November the 4th.
Thank you. And then we'll hear from Tim Mahoney.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the Spend TV for hosting this debate this evening. It is always good when constituents actually hear from a side-by-side comparison to the candidates. I'm your neighbor. I've been your neighbor all my life. I was born and raised here on the east side, grew up by White Bear, Maryland, and now I live down by Lake Phelan. And I went to the local schools over here. I took a couple years after, I know it cost me some votes here, but I graduated from Harding. I then took a couple years off and became a pipe fitter. I went to St. Paul Technical and Vocational School, which is now St. Paul College. And I spent 30 years building and installing heating and cooling systems in industrial settings. I've just recently retired, and I enjoy the idea of not having to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning. I am married to Susan Bishop. I have 2 adult daughters, and I am a stepdad to Susan's 3 adult sons, which makes for some interesting family dinners. I have been your representative for the last 16 years, and it has been a great honor to serve the East Side, serve someplace where I grew up and take great pleasure and pride in. I have worked on many different issues on the east side here, from when I first came in, the Phelan Corridor, Phelan Boulevard, and the jobs that were created on the Phelan Boulevard, the first new road in the city of St. Paul for many, many years. I have spent a lot of time helping Sheldon on Metro State and increasing the capacity and the ability of Metro State to serve the needs of the east side. And I have done a lot of other things in terms of trying to bring community together and have a voice at the Capitol.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from candidate for 67B, Sheldon Johnson.
Well, thank you very much, and thank everyone for being here tonight and being part of the democratic process. A little bit about my background. I'm married. My lovely wife, Ann, is here. I have 2 adult children. I'm a retired probation officer. I worked 35 years with Ramsey County in adult and juvenile probation. The reason I'm running for state representative is because I like the direction the state has gone, particularly over the last 2 years. Under the Governor Dayton's leadership and the democratically controlled House and Senate. When I came into the elected this last term, what we found at the Capitol is that we were $1 billion in deficit, and we owed the skills $1 billion as well. And what we decided to do is take a different path, and that path was to raise the income tax on the top 2%, the wealthiest of the wealthy, and also close the corporate loopholes. And when we did that, what we were able to do is balance our budget structurally, first time in 10 years, repay back our schools, pay for all-day K, freeze tuition, and put forth a bonding bill that really helps the infrastructure of the state of Minnesota. So this is the kind of progress I like to see in the state of Minnesota, and that I would continue to advocate for. My priorities, if I'm elected, is to continue investing in education, particularly the early learners, the 3- and 4-year-olds. I think we need to focus on a transportation system. I'd make a 20-year plan and how we're going to pay for it. I think we really need to get down and study that and make some plans accordingly. I want to move forward with broadband. That's a personal interest of mine, to make sure we have internet throughout the state of Minnesota. And lastly, I think health care coverage. Everyone in the state of Minnesota deserves universal health care coverage, and I will work to make sure that happens.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from John Quinn.
I'm John Quinn. I grew up on the east side. Actually, I'm living back in the house that I grew up in. I lived here for 18 years. I went in the Navy. I got out and I came back, and I worked for Fort Snelling National Cemetery, the Chicago Northwestern Railroad. Then I went out to Maine, and I worked in a shipyard for about 24 years. And I was a frontline supervisor of 30 to 40 men, women, and lost my job after they shut down. The Navy cut back on building ships, and they did away with my shift, and I came back home, and I was astonished, because when I was raising my children, I have 7 children. When I was raising my children, I couldn't get back home that often to really see what was going on here. But over the time that I was gone, we lost a lot of business here on the east side, and elsewhere. We had 3M, we had Whirlpool, we had American Hoist, and we had lots of companies here that paid good money, and people on the east side were doing well. And for people like me that learned as they went and didn't have a college education, could find good work. And now those places are gone, and they're replacing them with jobs that don't come nowhere near hiring as many people or paying the same money or benefits that they received then. I am a constitutionalist at heart. I believe in the Constitution. Life, liberty, and property are the basis of that, and that's what I stand for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now that we've heard the opening statements, we'll begin the question and answer period. The question and answers will be done on a kind of a random order, so I will let the first couple people know that they are going to be up. So the first one to answer this question will be Sheldon Johnson, and the second one will be Andrew Livingston. So the question is this: do you support continued expansion of light rail, and do you think there's sufficient funding for continued expansion of it?
I think we need to look at where light rail is being proposed. I'm a big fan of transit. I think we need to have all modes of transportation when you're developing a major city like the Twin Cities. When we look at the Gateway Corridor, which is going to be the transit corridor here on the east side of St. Paul, they're looking at bus rapid transit, so it probably won't be LRT here. But again, I think you have to look at each situation individually and study it, see what makes the most sense financially in terms of ridership, and then go forward from there.
Thank you. Andrew Livingston, and then that will be followed by John Quinn.
Light rail has never paid for itself, and I don't believe in investing in something that just doesn't, it's not going to pay for itself. I have to say I'm adamantly opposed to any kind of light rail line down the Bruce Vento Trail. There's been that proposal floated. That will block street traffic, it'll make homes uninhabitable, and it will destroy the Bruce Vento Trail, and I'm adamantly opposed to that. I talked to a man over there on English Street. If that light rail goes through there, his home will be uninhabitable, and everything he has is in that home, and he'll basically be homeless after that. I asked the people from the county, are you going to reimburse the people for putting that thing in there, and he wouldn't refuse to answer that question. I think we need to invest in the roads that everybody uses instead of the light rail and other projects that politicians want.
Thank you. And then we'll hear from John Quinn.
I'm opposed to the light rail also. I'm opposed to government being in business and competing with the private sector. We pay them taxes, and then we have to compete with them, and they get subsidies, and we can't compete with that. I believe in public transportation, but it should be with the private sector. That's how I feel about it, and that's how it should be.
Thank you. Tim Mahoney.
I have always supported the concept of light rail and good transportation and good transit for all people. There's a significant number of people on the east side that use public transit, and we need to figure out ways to improve it, whether it is bus, rail, streetcar, or any particular form. Now, where it will end up on the east side is a couple years out. We need to start looking at, as Sheldon Johnson said, where's the ridership? Who's going to use it? And then the other piece to that is, who does it affect? You're absolutely correct in trying to figure out how we would put something in that doesn't affect the businesses. We learned, I hope we learned, from the Green Line and all the problems that came up for those small businesses along the Green Line and the homeowners that are along the Green Line. So if we have learned from that, then we need to take a look at it for the east side.
Very much. When you see the stop sign, I ask you to please finish your sentence very quickly. And then we will now go for our next question, and we'll start with John Quinn and then Tim Mahoney. So here's the question. What will you do to address the growing number of people at risk of becoming homeless?
It gets to be more of a major problem all the time. It's because we've strayed from life, liberty, and property and protecting that people are unemployed and don't have a place to live. I myself volunteer my time and help the homeless over to the Dorothy Day Center, and I think that more of us need to do that. But we need to restructure or go back to the structure that we had. Life, liberty, and property is what makes people grow and learn. It's the basis of truth. When we abide by that, people make choices, and they learn from those choices. If it's a bad choice, they learn, and if it's a good choice, they learn and they grow. And that's how we learn. I mean, we have to have those 3 laws to prosper in our individual lives and in our societies. And until we go back to that, we will never solve that problem.
Thank you very much. Tim Mahoney, and then you'll be followed by Andrew Livingston.
Well, homelessness is a very complex problem. It has big parts in our educational system. It has a big part in the cost of housing and what your percentage of your income is being directed towards your housing. Typically, you should not have to pay more than 30% for your housing. And unfortunately, now we're going in 40 and 50% of our income is going to housing. We need to pull that back and get it back down to the 30%. We also need to figure out the jobs that we bring to the east side need to be good paying jobs. They don't need to be the minimum wage jobs. Even though we did increase the minimum wage this year, it's still not enough to keep a roof over your head. So we need to do the job training that gets people to 18 to 20 to $22 an hour jobs so they can afford to purchase their house or pay for rent in a 30% range. That is a big piece of it. The other piece is we need to start earlier in making sure that we close the achievement gap. We need to close that education gap because that is one of the big keys to homelessness.
Thank you very much. And then Andrew Livingston.
Well, I would agree with Mr. Mahoney that homeless is a complex issue because you not only have poverty and education, you also have some of them are mentally ill, and there's things we could do with that. But also, we could lower our property taxes, especially for senior citizens. I mean, I talked to a woman over on Orange Street who might be taxed out of her home, 21 years in that house, because there's an empty lot next to her, and so the taxes go up and up and up. And she's going to wind up, if not homeless, at least someplace else, perhaps in a nursing home where it's going to cost the state thousands of dollars a month to keep her, as opposed to letting her stay in her home. So I'm opposed to increasing property taxes on seniors, and actually all of us. I think seniors should be exempted from property taxes. And I think the best way to keep people out of homelessness is, again, have a good, strong economy, which is based on a pay-as-you-go and not a tax and spend or borrow and spend system, which we have right now.
Thank you very much. Sheldon Johnson, same question.
Homelessness is a very complicated issue, and we've tried to address it at the Capitol this last legislative session. One of the things we did was the bonding chair, Representative Alice Hausman, working with the legislature, we put in approximately $100 million into housing because people do deserve to have stable housing. We know how problematic that can be in our schools and our communities if people don't have a place to stay. But to really deal with homelessness, in addition to housing, you also need to have a job that pays. And I mean, we passed a minimum wage this past year, which was a huge deal, and that I'm very proud of. That's another thing that can be done, is to ensure that people are getting paid the kind of wages necessary to move forward. I'd also note health care. We need to ensure that everyone has health care, because when people don't have health care, the proportion of their money that they're spending on health care can take away from their housing, and that's just another issue.
Thank you very much. We are now going to go to our next question, and we'll start with Tim Mahoney, to be followed by Sheldon Johnson. How would you address Minnesota's high racial, economic, and educational disparity, or wide racial, economic, and educational disparity?
As I understand the question, it is the achievement gap and the equity gap. The achievement gap is something that we've really tried to address over the last 2 years. When we put in the all-day K and the 40,000 preschool scholarships for young people to go to a quality childcare, which has been proven to help people learn and learn well. Because if we educate people, if we educate our young and our disadvantaged youth, they have a better opportunity to climb the economic ladder and grab the golden ring. But I want to take a moment to just talk to people about the property tax exemption that my opponent wants to talk about. That's $1.5 billion a year. That's the 2% the tax increase that we put on all those people to fund all-day K, to fund our tuition fees, and I will come back to that particular.
Thank you. All right, and then we'll hear from John Quinn. Sheldon Johnson, and then to be followed by John Quinn.
I think probably the most effective way that the state can move forward on racial and economic disparity is through education. We need to ensure that we have public schools that are meeting the needs of our kids, and in particular, investing in that. The area that I think that could really be a big plus and show returns in the long haul is dealing with early learning and with kids in the early stages. That's where we really need to focus if we're going to deal with the issue of economic and racial disparity. So my plan would be to move forward on early education, early learners, and also look at higher education and to see how we can align the curriculum of training with the jobs that are out there in the future. I think that'd also be a big plus.
Thank you. John Quinn?
Again, I stand for life, liberty, and property, and we have a federal government that gets their hands into our schools, and they we pay them taxes, so we can get it back. It's like and we can't get the stuff we need back to do the things we need. It's like putting water in a bucket with holes in it, and we give it to the federal government. By the time we get it back, there's nothing left, and they put things out. They put regulations on it that we have to abide by if we use that money that way. I believe in communities getting involved in education. I believe that when we support correct principles, which is the foundation of those correct principles is life, liberty, and property, we start working together more. We get communities involved in teaching our children.
Thank you. And then Andrew Livingston.
Well, the very premise of the question is that there's a problem with economic disparity, and I disagree with that. If we have 100 people that earn $30,000 and 10 people that earn $1 million, and then the next year we have those same 100 people are now earning $40,000, but now we have 100 people or even 1,000 people earning $1 million. Is there a wider economic disparity? Well, sure, but the people at the bottom are still doing better, and that's what we need. We need everybody to do better by having a better economy. And how do you do that? Well, you don't tax and spend until all the big companies, like 3M, Whirlpool, American Hoist, until they all leave. And I hear all these plans about, well, we're going to tax this and spend on this and spend on this. Well, we've been down that road, and it's not good for the long-term health of our state economy.
Thank you very much. For our next question, we'll start with John Quinn, to be followed by Tim Mahoney. And the question is this: how do you propose changing the conversation from responding to personal violence to what we as a state can do to prevent sexual, domestic, and child abuse? John Quinn.
Well, you probably already know what I'm going to talk about. So, I think that all these problems stem from what I've been talking about. We strayed away from the foundation of this country, of the state, to abide and uphold and protect life, liberty, and property. We have to, when we do that, we reach out to one another. We know our neighbors. We come out the door. We have prosperity. You don't have to work 4 jobs to feed your family. Everything starts falling into place as we protect life, liberty, and property. It gives us the ability to learn and to recognize truth and to reach higher and higher and become better people.
All right, Andrew Livingston. I'm sorry, Tim Mahoney, to be followed by Andrew Livingston.
Well, one of the things that we did this year was if you have a domestic violence filed against you and convicted, you can't get a handgun permit. You can't get a gun. So that's one of the small things. But the real thing that we have to do is teach our young men that it's not okay to hit anyone, whether it's a woman or another man. When I was growing up, that was really the message my mother taught me, and taught me very, very well. You can't, we have to look at it that way. Where do we start, and how do we keep young men and women from becoming violent? Child abuse, that's another piece to it. We need to teach people how to be better parenting skills, how to have better parenting skills, how to do, you take a time out for yourself when your child gets you entirely undone. We need to do better learning earlier.
Thank you. Andrew Livingston?
Crime is a big problem in our district. I talked to people down there in precinct 7-2 the other day, and they were all concerned about crime and the amount of violence that was going on there. I think it has to do with the home issue. There's a lot of vacant homes out there, and some of that was driven by the bubble that burst. But there's some other things I could do, and I think this is pretty much a bipartisan issue. There's things we need to do to get people into these vacant homes. Single-family dwellings should remain single-family dwellings. That reduces the turnaround from rentals and whatnot. We need to keep people, single-family homes should stay single-family homes. And I think if we did that, we could reduce the crime in our neighborhood.
Thank you. Sheldon Johnson?
I think the question begs another question, that's how do you promote healthy families? And again, it's an issue that has a broad answer to it. You need housing, you need health care, you need jobs that pay, and you need a neighborhood, a community, a faith community that are all involved and that feel like they have a part in the lives of people's lives. So I think we all need to do a better job of taking care of each other. We need to teach respect, as Representative Mahoney mentioned, education in our schools and our communities to promote the kind of healthy families and lifestyles that we need to be a healthy community, I think is a way to go.
Thank you. And our next question will be starting with Andrew Livingston, and then we'll go to Sheldon Johnson. The question is this: what legislative measures, if any, would you support to reform the welfare system?
Well, the key to welfare reform is, of course, getting people off welfare by getting them good jobs. And the way you get good jobs is to keep businesses, large and small, in our state and in our city and in our district. And we're not going to keep businesses large and small in our district, in our state, if we keep taxing them and regulating them until they up and leave. We're doing things with the place where 3M used to be, and that's really nice, but why is 3M gone? Well, it's the tax and regulatory environment that caused them to leave. If we keep businesses, large and small, in the state, in our city, in our district, then we don't have to worry about people getting on welfare because they'll have good, high-paying jobs.
Thank you. Sheldon Johnson, and then John Quinn will follow Sheldon.
Well, I think the best way is, again, to promote a healthy economic recovery where people don't need to seek welfare. I mean, it's not something that most people want to do. Most people want to work, they want to have a good job, and be members of their community. So again, you need to take a broad view of the issue. I mean, you need to have jobs that pay well. You need to have a tax system that's progressive and fair. You need to have health care available to folks. This is how you're going to move forward with a welfare system that works well. And when people need help, they can get help, but they can also move on to a better life.
Thank you. John Quinn?
It's a big problem. I believe that you still have to go back to the three truths, the three laws that I've been talking about: life, liberty, and property. We need to recognize that the private sector, whether it be a family, a community, a corporation, or whatever it might be, does a lot better job than the government ever has and ever will. Their job is to protect those three laws. If we have the money that the government takes from us to do with whatever they want for things that they don't have a right to do under those three laws, we would have enough money to help our families and our neighbors that are having a hard time, And that would get less and less because companies would grow and we'd have all kinds of prosperity. When I was raising my children, the thing that made it hardest for me to do was them taking all my money.
Tim Mahoney, thank you.
Me? Well, welfare reform is a multifaceted problem, but 3M has not left the state. It is still very prevalent here. It has about 25,000 employees in the state, so I don't want 3M to get the idea that we thought they left. One of my concerns, and I will be pretty blunt, we had a lot less people on welfare prior to the Wall Street bubble that burst. And now we have large corporations that are keeping wages low while they have huge cash reserves and forcing their employees to be on housing assistance and food assistance. We need to have more responsible large corporations that are paying a living wage. That would take care of a substantial amount of the welfare concerns. Although, as I remember the budget, and I haven't asked them recently, and I think welfare is about 1% of our particular budget at the state,
Thank
so
you.
it's a pretty small piece.
Thank you very much. Tim Mahoney?
Mahoney.
Oh, then we're done then. All right, sorry. For our next question, and we'll start with Tim Mahoney, and next will be John Quinn. So what are key issues you have been hearing from East Side residents?
Well, the issues that I've heard from the East Side residents is primarily about schools, transportation, good jobs on the East Side, and schools. And those are the three big ones that I've heard. They're pretty happy with the rest of the way the state's going. We've added money to the K-12 budget last year. We did the all-day K. We did the preschool. People have been very receptive to the things that we were able to do. And surprisingly, I didn't expect to hear a lot from college students that they were very, very appreciative of the tuition freeze. They thought that was just the best first step we could possibly take to making higher education more affordable. So I've heard about the tuition freeze. Obviously, crime is an issue on the East Side. The K-12, the early childhood education pieces. So that's what I've been hearing.
Thank you. John Quinn, and that'll be followed by Sheldon Johnson.
I've been seeing a lot of disappointed people. Matter of fact, I've had people more than once tell me, I never had anybody like you come to my door. And they're probably right, because I'm probably a rare breed. They've told me jobs, crime, and having time with family. They're disappointed in what's been going on for quite a few years now on the East Side, because everything's been leaving. Everything's been getting bad. The jobs are gone. The people have to lock their doors during the day. They don't want to. If you go out campaigning, it starts getting a little bit dark. There'll be people home, but they don't answer the door, and I don't blame them. We get the government to start protecting those three true principles. We will start having prosperity. We will stop worrying about our neighbors or anybody coming and bothering us and taking our jobs.
Thank you. Sheldon Johnson.
The things I've been hearing about are maintaining our good public schools, having a transportation system that works, ensuring that we have good paying jobs with benefits here in the state. Public safety remains an issue that people are always interested in. And then I've heard a lot of excitement and interest about the new restaurants that are going in on Payne Avenues, like Ward 6, tongue-in-cheek. I've heard a lot of excitement about the Hams Brewery and what's going on with the Flat Earth and the organic food business there. A lot of excitement about Mississippi Market going on East 7th Street. And so basically, I heard a lot of excitement about what's going on the East Side and East 7th, and we're heading in the right direction. So I'm very gratified to hear that.
Thank you. Andrew Livingston.
Well, I suppose if you knock on the doors of your ardent supporters, you're going to get the answers you want. I've been knocking on everyone's doors, and no one's talked to me excitedly about organic food. The key issues they bring up are roads. They're sick and tired of the roads falling apart. And I have to agree. If we spent more money from our tax system on the roads that people use instead of on light rail that politicians want, people would be more happy because that's what they expect. They expect their tax money to be used for the public good and not for private interests of politicians. I'm not accusing anybody of getting any personal gain from it, but for some reason down there at the legislature, there just seems to be this obsession with this light rail. I can't understand why. It's never paid for itself, and it's something that's only going to be a drain on the Treasury. People every day drive on roads. They want them fixed.
Thank you very much. This question kind of tacks on to this previous one, and the question, and we'll start with Sheldon Johnson to be followed by Andrew Livingston. What is your vision for the east side of St. Paul?
I want it to be a place where really people want to come and live and raise their families. A place where they look forward to a great education, where we have parks, where we have restaurants, where people want to stay and live. And I think that's the direction we're heading. I think the other thing we need to really be appreciative of and celebrate is our cultural diversity. We have a lot of folks from a lot of different backgrounds. We need to use that as a real asset to our community. And I'm excited to have that as a part of the vision to make sure that the East Side continues to grow and be strong, and that we're all in it together to make it a great place to live.
Thank you. Andrew Livingston to be followed by Tim Mahoney.
Well, I think that I share some of that vision in that we want a place where it's family friendly, where every single family dwelling has a single family in it. I think we need to come up with a system or get our heads together somehow to figure out how to stop all this or fill up these vacant homes. I mean, good neighborhoods, I walk in and here's a vacant home and there's a vacant home. We need to get families in there so that the East Side can be a place where every home has a family and every family has.
Thank you. Tim Mahoney?
Well, my vision for the East Side is a place, I hate to go back to when I was growing up where many, many people lived on the East Side and worked on the East Side. But my vision for the East Side is a community that has a lot of involvement from its citizens, a strong community involvement where people can actually work in the neighborhood, play in the neighborhood, and raise their families in and on the East Side. The way that we get to that particular vision is we repurpose some of these particular places that have, like the 3M site on 7th Street, where we bring in new jobs, where we bring in economic gardening, take our small businesses and help them grow from 1 or 2 employees to 10 or 12 or 15, because that's really what will help our community is multiple small businesses that are prospering and doing well. So my vision, better K-12, better parks, good jobs, increased home values, and stronger community involvement.
Thank you very much. John Quinn?
Me and Tim Mahoney, we hold, listening to him, we hold some stuff common. I grew up on the East Side also, and I'm sitting here thinking about back when I was young, and when 3M and Whirlpool were here, and you see people walking to work with their lunchbox in their hand. I think that would be awesome if we could get that back. That people on the East Side could actually fill up their lunchbox and walk down the street and get to work in 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and have a good paying job like we used to have. The problem with a lot of small businesses that is not bad, but they're regulated and taxed so hard that most of them don't last. They can't compete. They can't even. There's so many laws. They're breaking laws without even knowing it. It's like I was saying before. We have to protect those 3 laws. You know what they are now, and we'll get our community back. I used to sit there and watch people pass by when my time's up. I'll tell you later.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, here's our next question. And we will start this question with Andrew Livingston, and then we'll go to Tim Mahoney. What areas of education policy, if any, would you like to see reformed?
First off, I'd like to get the legislature out of the education business. I mean, when you have chest pains, you don't call up your plumber. Yeah. And when you have a toothache, you don't call up on your auto mechanic. And when you have a problem with education, you don't go down to the state legislature. I can't blame it on these guys because it's not their fault, because it's not their job. We have a school board, which is an elected school board, and they hire a school administrator that gets 10 times what Mr. Mahoney gets for a salary, and it's their job to come up with curriculum and to hire and treat teachers. And if there's an achievement gap, it's their fault. It's not Mr. Johnson's or Mr. Mahoney's here. And that's the key to education, is you have to find the person responsible and hold them responsible. And that is our elected school board, and it is our school superintendent.
Thank you. Tim Mahoney.
Well, excuse me. Education reform, it depends. I mean, K-12, very much so. I'm so glad that we were able to get rid of some of that extra testing that we were doing and allow teachers to actually teach rather than spend more and more time teaching to the test. Our high schools, we need to get back to there needs to be a vocational element to our high school system. I mean, there are so many kids that go into college, go into debt, and realize that college isn't really for them. You know, I'm one of those. And then at our higher education levels, we need to not only just freeze tuition for our higher education, we need to reduce it. 25 years ago, the state, paid 2/3 of the cost of higher education, and the student paid 1/3. Today, that is reversed. And that is what's causing the tuition debt that is higher as a nation than our credit card debt. Unacceptable.
All right, then we go to John Quinn.
Education reform, it's, you heard me talk about it earlier. Education reform would be to get the government out of it, as far as the federal government goes, and not funding it unless we abide by their principle, the rules that they set forth. If I was raising children today, to be honest with you, they wouldn't go to school. I would homeschool them. They'd be better educated there. I think that the education reform has to take a whole new avenue, and that be community schools where communities get involved, and they would get involved if we'd abided by those laws of life, liberty, and property. Everybody gets involved.
Thank you. Sheldon Johnson.
Well, public education is one of the great institutions in our country and in our state, and we should be proud in Minnesota of what we do in public education. For reform, I guess I would look at making sure that we're funding music and the arts. That's extremely important. We need to have that in our public schools. We need to make sure that with our immigrant kids that we have good English language learner programs available for our young folks. I'm always a little bit bothered that we don't have sufficient phy-ed for our kids. Our kids need to be out exercising and get outside a little bit more. As I said earlier, I think we need to focus on our early learners, our 3- and 4-year-olds. I think that's going to be a great way to deal with the achievement gap. I think we need to fund fully special education so that these kids get off to a good start and can also have a chance to be successful and not be a drag perhaps on kids in the mainstream. And lastly, I would suggest that we work harder at aligning our educational format in higher education to the jobs that are available out in the community.
Thank you. We're going to just I have 3 questions here, and they're yes or no ones. So we will just do yes or no and see how it goes. And we'll start with Sheldon Johnson and then Andrew Livingston. Here's the first question. Do you support a Minnesota presidential primary?
Yes.
All right. Andrew Livingston?
Oh, yes.
And John Quinn?
Tell you the truth, I'm not too sure about that.
Okay. Tim Mahoney?
No.
Okay. And then here's the next question. Should a felon living in the community who's on probation or parole from a felony conviction be allowed to vote? And we'll begin with John Quinn.
Is that yes or no?
Yeah.
Can you say that?
Sure.
Because you threw me
Should
into it.
felons living in the community on probation or parole from a felony conviction be allowed to vote?
No.
Okay. Tim Mahoney.
Yes.
Andrew Livingston.
Did I say on probation or parole?
Yes.
Then no.
Okay. And then Sheldon Johnson.
Yes.
Okay. Here's the next one. Would you vote to leave Common Core out of our Minnesota schools? We'll start with Tim Mahoney.
I'm not real sure about the Common Core, so no.
Okay. Sheldon Johnson. No. John Quinn.
Definitely yes.
Okay. And Andrew Livingston.
Yes.
Okay. Now we've got one more question I think we can get through to. What should the legislature do to improve the state healthcare policies and programs? And there you get your minute. So we'll start with John Quinn.
You're getting used to me now. When you put something under an umbrella, and it started years ago with I'm drawing a blank. When the government got involved in insurance, whenever you put something under a big umbrella, the price goes up. The competition's gone. I believe that the government shouldn't have never been in insurance. Companies should have never been enforced to give their to insure their employees. If we bought our own insurance, we'd be more responsible for ourselves. It's a natural thing. We live by life, liberty, and property. We won't go to the doctor every time we stubbed our toe. We would take better care of ourselves. Insurance would go down. Healthcare would go down. There'd be competition. We would make a lot more.
Thank you. Tim Mahoney.
The simplest answer to that is a single payer, and a single payer will will reduce the cost of healthcare just going to a single payer by 30%, the same as what Medicare reduction in administrative costs. Many insurers, and you can go online and find out what their administrative cost is compared to their healthcare premium dollars. And I know it more in the workers' comp rather than the healthcare policy, but I know in workers' comp, there are insurance companies that are charging 88% administrative costs. So for 88 cents out of every dollar the premium pays. So I think a single payer formulated in the same fashion as a Medicare or Medicaid would probably be a big step towards having a better healthcare system in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you. Andrew Livingston.
Well, first off, let's remember that MNsure is not a healthcare program for poor people. It's a government agency. Has a 7-member board that gets 6-figure salaries, and their sole mission is to help people get access to health insurance that we already had in Minnesota. So right there, it's a level of bureaucracy we don't need. Then they came up with a $160 million website that didn't do what it was supposed to do, and now they're having to have even more millions to try to fix it. And the budget is ballooning to $40 and $50 million a year. So soon we're going to have to spend, $200 million in the past few years just for an extra layer of government bureaucracy to give access to what we already had. MNsure should be abolished. And quite frankly, the idea that government can provide better healthcare systems or services than a private sector is absurd. The idea that a single payer is going to cost cheaper than Blue Cross, it's preposterous.
Thank you. And then Sheldon Johnson.
Well, thanks to the Affordable Care Act and MNsure, the number of uninsured in Minnesota is at a record low, less than 5%. This is a 40% drop, and this is something we should be very proud of. Insurance companies can no longer deny you medical coverage due to pre-existing conditions. You can keep your kids on their health care plan to the age of 26. The thing to do to improve this would be to in my opinion, would be to probably improve the outreach to our immigrant community, to our Somali, Hmong, Latino population, so they can make sure they take advantage of the tax credits and availability of health care coverage. If I had a magic wand and could do what I want, I'd go with Representative Mahoney's single payer plan. That'd be the best way to go, but that's not where we are practically. So in the meantime, we need to do major outreach to these communities and to our senior citizens to make sure that they have the health coverage they deserve.
That time in the program where we are at the closing statements. I didn't get through all the questions, so feel free to contact the candidates and ask them the questions later on. So Sheldon Johnson, you'll begin with your closing response, followed by John Quinn.
Well, thank you very much for the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this and for everybody coming out. The opportunity to participate in democracy like this is great. I want to thank my colleague here, John Quinn, for running. It's a lot of work to run, and I appreciate your viewpoint on things. I think one thing we both agree upon is people need to get out and vote, and I totally agree with you on that and encourage people to do so. I'm pleased at the direction the state is going. I think we need to continue with a budget that's balanced, that we plan for in the future with respect to education and transportation. We need to fully fund our education system, particularly focusing on the early language learners. We need to develop a comprehensive transportation plan for the state of Minnesota, and we need to ensure universal health coverage for all our citizens. And lastly, since I've been involved in this for the last 10 years, I want to ensure that broadband or the internet is available throughout the state of Minnesota so people can get connected and their businesses and folks can access that important infrastructure tool.
Thank you very much. John Quinn.
Well, I'm really a simple guy. One thing I understand is truth. Some of the ins and outs of education or private industry, whatever it might be, the education of our children. I don't know all the ins and outs of all that, and I don't think any of us do. But I do know what it takes to prosper, and I do know what the government needs to do to make that happen. Life, liberty, and property are truths, just like the truths it takes to build a home, or to build a bridge, or to have water. You have 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, that's water. It always will be. That's the truth. Truth never changes. We need to protect those principles. Everybody that's ever lived holds dear for themselves their life, liberty, and property. Even the tyrants of the world, they're just willing to take everybody else's. And we need to protect that. As long as we're not stealing, taking someone else's life, someone else's liberty, or someone else's property, we should be able to do what we want. The government has no right to protect us from ourselves or to compete against us in business. We pay them taxes to do a job, not to tell us what we have to do. We've heard a lot about things that have been accomplished in this state, and every one of them were accomplished by money that was taken from the people, and got us more into the situation that we're in today.
Thank you. Andrew Livingston.
Well, I think the choice between the voters is clear. You can have more of the same old, where we tax more and spend more, regulate more, and then watch the businesses get up and leave. Or we can go down a new approach, where we tax less, spend less, are more frugal, and try to create the kind of environment where businesses will want to grow, will want to set up and grow. The choice could not be clearer. It's really, after some of these remarks, there's really nothing left to say, actually. And so all I can say is thank the League of Women Voters, and I hope everyone gets out and votes November 4th.
Thank you. Tim Mahoney?
Well, thank you. And again, thank you for putting on the debate. And I want to thank my opponent for a spirited debate and spirited contest. I want to do more balanced budgets. The first time in 10 years we had a balanced budget. I want to continue to work to enhance the business community here. We have 19 Fortune 500 companies. We bat way above our weight. The other piece that we really need to do is help the small businesses, the 5 and 10 person employees, expand their business and pay higher wages and locate in the city. We have 300 acres of polluted land that is not being used just on the east side alone. And putting that on the property tax rolls with business community and creating jobs in those particular 300 acres would be a great way for the future, as my vision works at that. Last year, we passed the Women's Economic Security Act, which helped women get the same wage for a job that a man gets. We need to continue to build on that. The Women's Economic Security Act helped women start businesses and get into professions that pay a high wage, whether it's in the medical device field or in the building trades. We need to continue that. We need to enhance that. And then my other vision for this is, and this is a personal issue for me because it's in my committee, we have 170 job training programs in the state. And we have 170 different ways of determining whether they're successful. And when I ask for accountability from all those 170, they have resisted. I'm going back next year, and I'm going to force accountability so that whether it's Andrew or Sheldon or John or myself, when we look at it, we can determine whether that job training program is a good program or a bad program.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the candidates. Thank you for participating tonight. Thanks to all the volunteers, the SPNN, that's St. Paul News Neighborhood Network, the Hayden Heights Library, our candidates, and of course all of you here in the audience, and many of you who submitted the questions online. Remember to stop by the registration table to learn more about the League of Women Voters. Remember, both men and women are invited to join. And let's give everyone here a round of applause. Thank you.